Colonel Tom Manion, U.S. Marine Corps retired, is a Philadelphia native who served 30 years in the active and reserve Marine Corps. Aside from his military career, he has also worked for Johnson & Johnson through the 1990s and has had various leadership roles and has built a reputation for solving problems and delivering results. Tom is the father of First Lieutenant Travis Manion, a Marine officer who made the ultimate sacrifice for his country in April of 2007 in Iraq. After the loss of Travis, Tom and his family established the Travis Manion Foundation, which has really 3 lines of effort: to support our military, to support the families of our fallen, and to help create the next generation of leaders in this country. Tom's late wife was the founder and visionary of the Travis Manion Foundation. Janet Manion passed away April 24th, 2012. She devoted every day to putting service above self and set that example for her family and for her community. Tom is the co-author of the recently released book, Brothers Forever, which is the story of friendship, service, and sacrifice between their son Travis and his Naval Academy roommate and Navy SEAL, Brendan Looney. So there is no more appropriate place for Colonel Manion to come and share the story of Travis and Brendan than here at the Marines Memorial Club, where we honor the legacy of military service. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Tom Manion.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Chris. John Manion, great to be here, sir. As Chris said, I can't think of a better place to be and share about this story. And if there's any group that understands that, it's a lot of you that are here that have served as well. You know, for me, I can't think of a more important time to be out here talking about this story and the sacrifice of these guys than today. Since 2001, as we all know, you know, we've got men and women in harm's way, and they still are today. A lot of us don't hear a lot about it, but we still have 10,000 in Afghanistan. We have 3,000 Marines headed, or service members headed back to Iraq. So, you know, here it is 2015, and the pace that these service members have been on since 9/11 is probably never happened in our nation's history. And not only that, we've got, you know, we've got a group of volunteers, and we have this group of volunteers, and we've got the rest of the country that isn't as connected as maybe they should be. And so this book is about trying to share the story of these guys. It's not really about them. They're a representation of all the brave men and women that are stepping forward to serve this country. And it's really more an opportunity for me to tell this story in a way to the rest of America so they can be maybe more connected. And it's certainly, there's enough combat in here because we wanted to talk about the times that Travis and Brendan were in harm's way, but it's as much about that as it is about the families and about their friendship and about, you know, who these people that serve are and why they serve our country. And so this story is really all about that, and there couldn't be a more important time to be out here talking to the rest of the country because, you know, you sit here and you really don't realize what's going on with our men and women overseas. You know, we hear so much about other things, and there's so many distractions that, you know, it's pretty easy for us to just sort of be here and, you know, forget about what's happening over there. I remember the week after I lost Travis, I got a call from Fox Fallon, Admiral Fallon, and he was then the CENTCOM commander. And he says, you know, it's amazing. He said, like, I just came back last week and I couldn't believe what our young men and women were doing over there. And I'm in Tampa and I'm with my wife, and I was just watching everyone and observing. And it's like they don't really know. They don't really have any appreciation for what these brave men and women are doing. So So that's really the essence of why I thought it was necessary to sort of write this story about these guys, and these guys really more as a representation of so many that serve. But, you know, the last time I heard from my son was a week before we lost him. We lost him 29 April 2007. And he was a member of 1st Recon Battalion. They were in Fallujah, his first tour, and they were looking for Marines that had experience in the Fallujah area to be part of what they called a MIT team, Military Transition Team. It was the time when we had the surge going on, and they wanted Marines to embed with the Iraqis. And my son Travis was one of the Marines from 1st Recon Battalion that was selected to go, one of the officers, one of about 10 guys really that live with the Iraqis. And you know, we knew it was a tough mission. He left the day after Christmas, 2006, and you know, we got the calls, and I could just tell early on we got the calls that, you know, they were going through some tough things over there. But the last time I talked to him, you know, it was a different message. There was a different tone in his voice, and you know, when he called me, the one thing he kept saying over and over again to me was, "Dad, hey, we're fighting in the streets every day over there, over here," and I don't think the rest of the country knows that. I don't think they see what these brave Americans are doing, these brave Marines are doing in the streets of Fallujah. And it was unusual. It was an unusual call because for the first time ever, you know, you always look forward to those calls on the weekends on the satellite. And the first time ever, he kept getting cut off. And he kept calling back. He probably called me back 4 times. And every time he called me back, he kept saying the same thing. You know, "Dad, you know, they really can't have any appreciation for it." And the reason he knew that, Camp Fallujah was nearby. And nowadays they have cable. And these guys get a chance to go back and watch the cable TV, and they see what we're watching back here. And he's with his Marines in the street, and he's looking on cable, and he's just like, it's not even being mentioned. I mean, they have no idea what we're sacrificing over here for our country. So, you know, that next week, we got the knock on the door. And, you know, first thing I did after, you know, total shock and disbelief is called my wife and my daughter together, and I said, "You know, this is what Travis kept telling me. This is the message he was sharing with me." And so at that point as a family, we pledged that we were going to let people know. So when the newspapers called, and they did, because it was that period of time when the news wanted to hear about the next guy that went down. And when the TV channels called and they said, "Do you want to talk?" We said, "Yeah, we're going to talk." And really, as a family, we've been talking ever since. And part of what we're doing is one of the ways we're talking, you know, I decided I was going to write this book. My wife started a foundation to work, as Chris said, with our veterans and the families of the fallen and that next generation. She thought that was so important, and we're following through on that. But you don't know. I mean, you know, I think the most natural thing when you're grieving is to pull down the shades, lock the doors, and tell everyone to go away. And that's probably maybe where we would have been if it wasn't for what I heard from my son that week before we lost him. And so I set to write the book. At the time, my wife was starting up the foundation, and I said, "You know what? I think maybe I should write the story of these guys and what they did," because you know, fast forward 6 months, and the Marines had turned the tide in Fallujah. And, you know, the days that Travis was fighting in the streets every day, 6 months later, they were handing out soccer balls to the kids. And the Marines started to come back, and they told me, "You know, your son had an incredible impact on the Iraqis that he served with." They actually named an outpost after Travis, Combat Outpost Manion, just north of Karma, outside of Fallujah. And when General Allen came to present an award to us in our hometown, he said, "You know, it's one of only 2 outposts named after Americans by the Iraqis." You know, so they thought highly of him. So I said, this is it. I'm going to tell the story about how the Marines turned the tide and their devotion to freedom and working with the Iraqis and what happened there. And so as a Marine Corps colonel, I had opportunity to go over to Fallujah, to Iraq, and to visit over there. I made the trip in 2010, and I had a chance to actually talk to the Iraqis that my son served with, and they talked about the impact of the Marines and how much they helped them, push forward, and how proud they were of where they were then, and they told me about my son and the impact my son had in working together with them, and the partnership and really the brotherhood they had with the Iraqis. And so, when I left Iraq, it was kind of surreal, but it's part of the story as well, because I'm on the flight leaving 2010, and I'm there with 5 heroes with flag-draped coffins coming back. And if you would have thought in 2010, nobody knew we were in conflict, but we still had men and women giving their lives in 2010. And I got back to start putting together the story, and one of the things we always had as a family was my son's friends, and there was no better friend than his Naval Academy roommate, Navy SEAL Brendan Looney. And Brendan would, anytime he was home before he deployed, he'd come to our home and always check in with us. When he got done SEAL training, actually, he called up and said, he was coming up. Most of the time we had folks visiting the home, but nobody would ever come by themselves. They'd come with friends, and type of person Brendan was. He came up and spent the night with my wife and I, and just talked the whole night about Travis and his friendship and how much they meant to each other. And so I came back in the spring of 2010, started to pull things together, and then we got a call. 21 September 2010, we got a call from Brendan's mom, and it was another blow. We lost Brendan in the hills of Afghanistan. It was like losing another son. And so Marine Looney, first person she called was my wife, and we headed down to Maryland just to be there. I mean, there's not much you can do just to be there to support, and we were there to support Maureen and Kevin and the rest of the family. And at that point, I started to think about that story, that story of Travis and the Iraqis. I realized, it's a bigger story. It's a bigger story about all that served. It's Travis and Brendan, it's Afghanistan, it's Iraq. It's all the sacrifice that these young men and women are doing, and the incredible effort they're putting forward for our country. So I started to think about maybe the bigger story. And then if you fast forward from September to that following spring, the Navy SEALs, they located and killed Osama bin Laden. And then 2 weeks later, the president shared the story of Travis and Brendan on his Memorial Day speech and talked about them as an example. And I think at that point, I thought for certain that, yeah, this is the story that I want to tell. I want to tell the story of these guys, their friendship, what it meant to each of them, their service, their sacrifice, and in a way, hopefully tell the story for all the brave men and women that are serving today, and do whatever we could to make sure that the rest of America does know from that original message that I got from Travis. And when we've got 1% serving and the other 99%, off at the mall, and so much happening now with the selfie world and everything else going on, more stories have to be told like this. It was great to see what happened with American Sniper and the popularity there. And so this is just another story of 2 guys that put it on the line, but they'd be the first to say it's not about them, it's about everyone else that's serving. So what I'd like to do today is just share a little bit about the book, some background about the book, and things that you may not see in the book. So I'm going to start off with a little video that gives a backdrop of Travis and Brendan and that Memorial Day time with the president talking about them.
A recent poll shows Americans have the most respect for members of the U.S. military. They hold them in the highest regard, and that esteem is for good reason, and it often comes at a high cost. Our final story here tonight is about two Americans in uniform. They were best friends, and they went off to fight in separate wars.
Travis Manion and Brendan Looney, roommates at the Naval Academy, close as brothers. One became a Marine and went to Iraq, the other a Navy SEAL in Afghanistan. Today they were reunited, side by side in Arlington National Cemetery.
That's what kind of gets me by, is just knowing that they're going to be together.
On April 29th, 2007, while fighting to rescue his fellow Marines from danger, Travis was killed by a sniper.
6 months after Travis died, Brendan tried to express what Travis meant to him.
I was lucky enough to room with Travis at the Naval Academy for 2 years. In a very short time, he became another brother to me. He was a great friend, and I'll forget him, and I miss him.
Brendan did what he had to do. He kept going. He poured himself into his SEAL training and dedicated it to the friend that he missed. He married the woman he loved, and his tour in Korea behind him, he deployed to Afghanistan. On September 21st of last year, Brendan gave his own life, along with 8 others, in a helicopter crash.
Travis was moved to Arlington. Both families were there, the two mothers holding tight to each other. Travis's father, himself a former Marine, spoke their epitaph.
First Lieutenant Travis Manion, USMC, Lieutenant Brendan Looney, United States Navy, warriors for freedom, brothers forever.
The friendship between First Lieutenant Travis Manion and Lieutenant Brendan Looney reflects the meaning of Memorial Day. Brotherhood, sacrifice, love of country. It is my fervent prayer that we may honor the memory of the fallen by living out those ideals every day of our lives, in the military and beyond.
Gives you a little background and insight, a little bit about Travis and Brendan in Arlington. You know, one of the things you never have a discussion with your children is, you know, what happens if. And when Travis left my wife and I, and you know, we just never wanted to go there with him. And you know, so when we lost him, you're in a state of shock, and we were like, you know, where are we going to bury him? He can be buried in Arlington. Or, you know, near home. My wife and I said, well, bury him near home. You know, we want him near us. And, you know, about a month after that, we started to hear from a lot of family and friends that he had a very serious conversation with them and said if anything happened to him, he wanted to be in Arlington. And so I called down to Arlington. They said, sure, you know, we've done that. We've actually reinterred soldiers and moved them down to Arlington, and we can do that. And so we started to talk about it. My wife and I were ready to do it, and but she really, you know, couldn't make the decision. She, you know, visited him every day and just couldn't come to grips with deciding to move him down. My daughter was more supportive of moving him, but it was my wife at the end of the day that really couldn't make that decision. And 3 years later, we had a wooden cross for Travis. We never even got him situated because we kept thinking, we're going to make this decision. And you saw Brendan's wife there. She came in from San Diego. She was at Travis's service, knew he was not in Arlington, but she had forgotten all about it. She said, you know, I want Brendan next to Travis in Arlington. And at that point, my wife said, okay, this is the time. You know, it's sort of funny how things work. You wonder why things work the way they do. We had never got him situated. And Arlington and the Department of Army made it happen. And in a matter of a week, we got Travis reinterred and moved him down to Arlington. They're actually in Section 60, where a lot of the heroes from Iraq and Afghanistan are, in Section 60 down in Arlington. So we moved Travis down. You saw in the video, we wanted this quiet little ceremony. And, you know, they wanted to have it the same day. I said, no, that's Brendan's day. We'll move Travis in quietly, just a few family. And you saw the Loonies there. They insisted, You know, I think the one thing I like to do is share with the rest of the country is the families that support the men and women that serve, and you know, the strength of the families, and the Loonies are a great example of that. And there they were that day. They insisted they were there together with us that Friday before we were going to bury Brendan. And this quiet ceremony, and the Marines there, the Marine Corps, the basic school, the officer school in Quantico actually named the hall after Travis Manion Hall. And I stepped out of the vehicle, and there were all the Marines from Manion Hall standing there as we went to lay Travis to rest, his final resting place. You know, the rest of the country believes that, you know, who would ever put on a uniform and do what these guys do? Must be because they don't have any other choices, and it's couldn't be, you guys know that here, couldn't be further from the truth. You know, and these guys are an example of that. They're both great students at the Naval Academy, did very well academically, both Division I athletes. My son Travis below wrestled at Navy. Brendan was an incredible athlete. He was on the football team at Navy, played 2 years, and then never played lacrosse. Picked up a lacrosse stick his junior year, and his senior year, he was, if you ask anyone who led the team his senior year, it was Brendan Looney, and his second year playing lacrosse. So much so that Navy played Syracuse in the final game. Biggest crowd ever at Raven Stadium, and if you ask anybody who the heart and soul of that Navy team was, it was number 40, Brendan Looney. And that's the type of guys that are in uniform. They're not there because they got no options. They're there because they believe in this country. They're there because they believe in something bigger than themselves. They're there because they believe in service. And, you know, it's an important message, I think, for the rest of the country to really understand and appreciate. And we don't hear as much of that, right? We hear every day, we hear about the issues with our veterans, but we don't understand or hear enough about the inspiration that they are and what they do for us. So at Navy, and like a lot of the schools, this is graduation day. This is my wife and I on the left, pinning on my son's second lieutenant bars, and Travis and Brendan there. You know, proud day. But the other thing, again, that people don't really appreciate, these guys, you know, they graduated, and before long, you know, Travis was in 1st Recon, and he was on his first tour to Fallujah. You know, there's not a lot of time to celebrate. Brendan as well was on his way to Korea. In graduation, Brendan was actually Naval Intelligence. Didn't go Navy SEAL right away. And when he heard Travis was at 1st Recon and heard Travis coming back from that tour, he applied to the Navy SEALs. It was the first one ever to get a waiver for colorblindness for the Navy SEALs. Travis was back from his first tour, as I shared earlier, was getting ready for his second tour and came back home. He was with my son-in-law, and they were at a football game. My son-in-law was really worried. There was so much in the news about all the unrest over there and how it was getting worse and worse. And he said, you know, how about if I trip you down the steps? They were leaving the football game. They went to see a Philadelphia Eagles game. And you won't have to go back. You break your leg and you can stay. And you know, he's kidding. But he said, Travis got serious all of a sudden and said, hey, Dave, if not me, then who? If I don't go back, who's going in my place? I'm the guy that's most prepared. I'm the guy that's got to go. And so you'll hear about those words a little bit when we talk about the foundation, because when my wife started the foundation, she took those 5 words, simple yet powerful, and you know, that's been sort of the rally cry for our foundation and what we're doing with our character program, with the veterans and with the families of the fallen. This is Travis on the left. With the guy with him is Justin Bales, a New York City firefighter. Justin, when we talked to him, he talked about all the patrols they were on. Almost every day they were out on patrol in Fallujah getting shot at. And he shared one story where they were pinned down, and Travis and a couple Marines pulled them out. Couple of their guys were wounded in the center of Fallujah. On the right-hand side is a chemical attack had that bunch of chlorine chemical attacks, and this is just one of a few. Travis was recognized by the Iraqis. He actually crawled in and put himself on the line to pull out a couple of Iraqis and save their lives. And one of the reasons that they recognized him the way they did, realized that he was really caring about who they were and partnered with them in a special way. We heard a lot about that tour. One of the things that we heard from a Marine general at the memorial service, he said, you know, I've been at too many of these memorial services, but it's the first time I've been at one where the Iraqis asked to speak. And it's a testament to the efforts of your son. And the Marine said, yeah, we were sitting in Camp Fallujah and the doors swung open and all the Iraqis walked in and they were like, what's going on here? And they realized the Iraqis were there to recognize the efforts of Travis and his Marines, because his Marines were a big part of it. I actually have a video that, you know, a lot of people don't get a chance to see. This is at Camp Fallujah, and this is the memorial service, and the Marines videotaped some of this, and I actually have the Iraqi colonel speaking about my son at his memorial service in Camp Fallujah, so I'd like to share that with you.
By the name of God. قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في الكتاب الكريم. Our blessed God said in our Quran, لكل أجل كتاب. For each soul there is a day where they will come. نحضر هذا اليوم. You can arrive to this day. الحفل التأميني. Honor the memorial service. المقاتل for the warrior Colonel Travis Manion, who sacrificed with the most precious thing the human being can ever has, which is alive, in order to defend the Iraqi individual freedom, and to plant the democracy basics in this country. He was a brave warrior, never fear the death. And we ask our God to give him in his heavens. We've learned a lot from that warrior. And we can't say much except we will continue the way we worked on. Thanks a lot for your arrival.
So I actually met with that Iraqi colonel when I made my visit in 2010. And my son had shared with me about the Iraqi colonel. He said, Dad, you know, they were over there for a while, and you know, some of the leadership in the Iraqis was not what it needed to be. And this Iraqi colonel showed up, and he said it was so inspiring. He stood up before a room of Marines and said, when you think of Iraq, think of us, and we're going to fight for our freedoms. And there's a lot, I guess that's the other part of what America doesn't hear. There's a lot of great people over in Iraq that are struggling. You talk to the men and women that have served over there, they'll share that with you. You don't see those faces, you don't hear that story. The rest of the country doesn't hear that story. But that's in fact, you know, why we're back over there, because fortunately, you know, people recognize that. I don't know that the average American recognizes it as much as they need to. But I wonder where that Iraqi colonel is at this point, because he's a heck of a leader. Hopefully he's in the middle helping us turn the tide once again. The guy on the right was actually my son's translator, and he's now in school in Florida. And he came to visit my wife and I, and you know, in the course of the evening, he was telling us about their time together. And then he finally shared this piece of paper. He was so excited to show us, and here it was a letter of recommendation for his entry into this country. And I looked at the date. It was a week before we lost Travis, and Travis had written this letter of recommendation. And here he was going to get access. He's actually in school in Florida, and it was so special to him. So he said he wanted us to have this letter. As we said, nah, that's your letter. You take it with you. Travis wanted you to have it, and you know, so he left. And about an hour later, my wife was around the front door. She said, "Tom, look at this." He had folded it up and put it underneath a bowl beside the front door. He insisted that we had it. You know, this is Brendan's wedding day, and you keep moving on. Brendan was a pallbearer, and he couldn't make it to Travis's service because he was actually in Navy SEAL training. He was in BUDS. And he called us up, and you know, obviously very emotional. I don't know if you know about SEAL training, but they start about 130 guys. They graduate around 30. And Brendan was what they call the honor man. He was the #1 guy of his BUDS class. And you know, if you talk to guys that were in that class, they said it wasn't even close. It was like he was possessed. So you're supposed to carry a 40-pound pack. You know, Brendan said, "I'm going to carry 60." And you know, they're tough runs, and Brendan's blowing his fellow candidates away on everything he did. And you know, we got to after SEAL training. You know, I talked about the visits. You know, Brendan, one of the first places he came is to see my wife and I, and spent that night with us at our home. And then shortly after that, he was married, and he called my wife over and gave her his Navy SEAL trident and said, "This is for you." He said, "I wouldn't have gotten this without Travis there with me all the way." And he did that on the wedding night. And they couldn't have been more gracious. You know, Brendan tried to have me fill in for Travis wherever he could. And, you know, they were always, Amy and Brendan were always looking out for us, making sure that we were doing okay. And we went up to talk to them. We said, "Well, you know, what's going on, guys? Where's the honeymoon?" And that's when Brendan shared with us, "Well, I'm deploying to Iraq in a couple of days." And again, you know, I mean, it's the message for the rest of the country, you know, what these families go through, what these men and women go through. And here he is, you know, a couple of days after his wedding, and he's on a deployment. And that's not just Brendan. It's, you know, so many are doing that. And that's not something anyone's going to hear about, but it's so prevalent. Brendan went on several tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. Brendan was SEAL Team 3. So if you heard of American Sniper Chris Kyle with SEAL Team 3, Brendan served with Chris Kyle. He was one of the officers there. General Allen talks about when he was in charge in Afghanistan, he remembers hearing about Brendan and his team and the havoc they wreaked on the Taliban in the hills of Afghanistan. And Brendan was a heck of a leader, and not like Travis, not the loudest guys in the room, but you knew they were there. They demanded a lot of respect. You know, I think, you know, you got what Brendan's doing and what the rest of our service members are doing, and then you got his wife, Amy, you know, holding down the fort back home. And it's the other part of the story that's not shared enough. And Amy was the type of leader, she'd work with the other SEAL wives, make sure they were all right. Brendan and Amy never said goodbye. They'd always say, "See you later." And Brendan was on his 59th combat mission. 58 missions, 59th combat mission when we lost him, 2 weeks from coming home. And they were in a turnover. And there was only one guy from the group that was leaving that was with the new group. And it was Brendan, because he was going to be the guy to take them out there and make sure they understood what they were dealing with. And we lost Brendan on 21 September 2010. You know, I share with you about Arlington, but you know, maybe for this group, many of you have been there. again, message for the rest of the country. If you haven't been there, make sure you get there. You know, it's a part of our fiber. It's a part of who we are as Americans. It's a part of why these guys do what they do. And Brendan and Travis are in Section 60. They're right side by side. There's my wife and the Marines and my daughter and granddaughter there when we reinterred Travis. And on the right is President Obama coming down to visit Travis and Brendan's site after the Memorial Day speech. And my wife actually and my daughter had an opportunity to go into the West Wing, and they said that that picture was hanging. The president had that picture hanging in the West Wing. You know, in terms of the book, that's some of the insights of the book. I mean, if you want the rest of the story, you're going to have to get the book. That's why you're here tonight, right? But I hope you do read the book. You know, the book is there's a lot more to the story than what I share with you tonight. What I wanted to do is just make sure you had some insights and some different things that even aren't in the book. My wife started a foundation. Fortunately, we had good friends, and they said, you know, set up a memorial fund. And so we did. You know, you're in shock, and we set up a memorial fund in my son's name in lieu of flowers. And, you know, I guess because of how things were going in the country at that time, we had funds coming in from all over. And before we knew it, we were sitting there, my wife was sitting there with $200,000 and those 5 words, if not me, then who? And she took that every day and year after year, and as Chris said, we wanted to help our veterans. We're still doing that today. We wanted to work with the families of the fallen. And one of the most important things for her is to create that next generation of leaders. And that's getting out and having a voice and making sure we're sharing about service and sacrifice and what that all means. And we go out to high schools. We've talked to over 200,000 students, high schools, and we pull in veterans. We have veterans get up in front of these high school kids and talk about character and talk about service. Not to recruit them in the uniform, but to talk to them about service. And what better inspiration than our men and women in uniform, the guys that put so much on the line for others. And so if you want to really honor them, go out in your, you know, in your family, you know, in your community, at your school. Go out there and make a difference, and make a difference in honor of those that serve and put everything on the line for us every day. And so we get out and we talk about, if not me, then who? We say, okay, you know, you're not going to change overnight. You're not going to, you know, have everything together overnight. You're not going to have character overnight. But talk about each morning getting up and ask yourself that question. If I don't step forward, who will? If not me, then who? And we talk about the little things. If you're going to be good at the little things, you're going to be ready when the big things happen. And so, you know, that's really resonating. We're now 8 years. As Chris said, lost my wife, Janet, 3 years ago now. 5 years almost to the day after my son. She came down with cancer. You know, probably related to the stress from losing the son. But those 5 years that she had, she put everything into making sure that we were there to do what we needed to do to help. And it gets back to that last phone call again, you know, what my son said and what we decided to do at that point as a family. And so this book is about that story. The foundation is about that story when it's all said and done. But the movement continues. We talk about being part of the If Not Me Then Who movement, and you know, we're out around the country, and it's getting more and more legs. So we're excited about that. My daughter runs that today. She runs the foundation. She stepped forward after lost my wife. What I thought I would do is share. You know, the foundation is doing incredible work. So Amy Looney, I share with you about Amy. Well, Amy heads up what we call our survivor services. She works with families of the fallen. And we talk about if not me, then who. We talk about, you know, that grieving time, and we know what that's about. But there's only so much time that you can, you know, sit down and grieve, and then you gotta start picking it up and moving. And we say, if you really want to honor the fallen, then you challenge the living. And so we work with some of the families, and we go off on expeditions, and we help other people. And it's a great healing process for what the families are going through. And this video is about that, and I'll share that with you.
My family and I have been building houses since 2007, and we've been building them in honor of my brother Shane Harris, who was killed in Iraq in 2006. This last 3 years, we've been coming down to Guatemala, and we've partnered with Travis Manion Foundation.
Oh, last year was great. Last year was totally unexpected. I was so, I guess, high from what happened that I was telling everybody I knew.
If you had asked me 5 years ago before my brother died if I would take my one and only vacation and go and fix somebody's house in West Virginia, I never would have done it. I did more healing in those few days in West Virginia than I had in 3 years prior.
I've been able to open up more to people and let people realize that, you know, I'm not quite healed yet, but I'm still working on it.
I was Ashley Moyer's fiance. I was with her over there in Baghdad when she was killed. While I was there, I was on scene for 8 hours watching the truck burn, and it literally ripped my soul out. And doing stuff like this, finally getting to, is kind of starting to put it back together.
For the first time in my life, knowing that I was safe and loved and free to talk about whatever I wanted to, and to know that there are other people, as terrible as it is, that do understand.
It's so much bigger than just me and my family. This is about all of us. To see people who have lost so much give so much back, it's life-changing.
I love the fact that I'm able to help those less fortunate because of my tragedy. I would have never done anything like this.
It gives us a chance to go out and say, yes, our son's died, and yes, my son completed suicide, but it's not the end of the world. It's just we choose to go out and honor them in different ways.
I've struggled with this for 7 years now, and they know it's like a roller coaster with me. But I mean, now, you know, when I go back and I tell friends about it, I'm going to tell them it doesn't really get much better than that. And it's all about helping other people, which is what Ashley inevitably wanted to do.
I greatly appreciate what Travis Manion Foundation, how they had the vision to know that you honor the fallen by challenging the living, and they sure are challenging us.
So that's just some of the work, and Amy Looney actually leads that for us, and you know, she's my hero. She does incredible work working with the families and going on these expeditions, and had a group just came back from New Mexico. They were on an Indian reservation doing great work, and they got a lot of trips planned this year coming up. So we've got that. We've got the character program where we're working with, we call our veterans ambassadors, and we get them out in front of the high schools and we talk about character. We talk about leadership, service, integrity, and moral courage. And we leave them with that message, if not me, then who? And then we have our transition services where we're actually working with veterans with internships in different companies. And we have an office in San Diego, and we have one in outside of Philadelphia, and another satellite office in Washington. I guess the other thing we have, and you may have heard this if you know anything about our foundation, we have something called the 9/11 Heroes Run. And we started out with a run in our hometown around 9/11. We said, you know, part of that awareness, you know, making sure the community understood who was serving them. And we said, what a better time, you know, 9/11, appreciate the service and sacrifice of the veterans and all of our first responders. And my brother came forward. My son had actually visited Rescue Team 1 in New York before he left for his second tour. He came back and they had given him a hat, and on the back it said 9/11, never forget. He said, Dad, wear this when I'm gone. Know that this is what we're doing. And, you know, so that story I'd share with my brother, and he said, you know, let's do something on 9/11. Let's do a 9/11 Heroes Run. And we started that 5K, and, you know, we got ready to do the run, and we had 500 people come out to our hometown. And now we have over 50 runs across the country. Last year in our hometown, there was 3,500 runners. In Houston, it's the 9/11 event for them in the city of Houston. And they had 1,000 down in San Diego and 1,000 in Phoenix and in all different places. And that's sort of the way we're approaching this, one community at a time, working with the communities, grassroots, really getting in and working with the students, working with that next level that's going to be stepping forward to serve, and you know, try to get that message out. Back to that initial conversation with my son about, you know, the rest of the country really doesn't know. And so we're one of, you know, probably others that are out there, but we're on a mission, and we've been on it for 8 years, and we're not stopping. And you know, you'll see that if you read the book. If you want to visit the foundation site, it's travismanion.org, and you'll see all the stuff that we're involved in. Travis was a funny guy, you know, had great sense of humor, and knew how to kid around and joke. And there's so many stories that I have. You know, the guys talk about, you know, in the book there's one, you know, and I think it sort of talks to who Travis was. So he's a second lieutenant. He shows up. First Recon's already well into their training in 29 Palms. And he's out, you know, and they give him the walkie-talkie. He's supposed to communicate with the air. And he gets on the walkie-talkie, and, you know, the coyotes are out there. The coyotes are the umpires. And there was one coyote that was particularly, you know, on the guys quite a bit and riding them. And it's good. I mean, they're trying to get them ready. But this guy really was rubbing a lot of people the wrong way. And I guess maybe he knew that he had a second lieutenant there, and he was going to weigh in on him. And so he weighed in on him a few times. Said, you know, what are you doing, Lieutenant? You're not talking on the radio in the right way. Do you know what you're doing? And so he'd come back, and then Travis would try again. He'd come back and said, Lieutenant, you know, what's going on with you? Do you know what the hell you're doing? And then finally, the last time, he said, Lieutenant, you just ought to go home, you know, because you obviously don't know what the heck you're doing, do you? And he said, no, sir, but I did stay at a Holiday Inn Express last night. So the whole line got silent. The major didn't know what to say, and he just got quiet. And all the guys from First Recon were slapping each other high fives. So the guys from First Recon actually told me the story. So they said when they came back to the headquarters, they said, where's this lieutenant? We got to meet him. And they were slapping him high fives, saying, good job, you know. You gave it to that coyote. So that's the type of you know, personality he had. He was quick-witted and always out for a good time. But when it came down to business, you know, he was ready to go and a hard worker. And, you know, wish he was still here, for sure.
An interesting perspective is how, you know, he worked with a MIT team, which, you know, we didn't really have much training to work MIT teams. And the first MIT teams that we sent out in Iraq were guys that we pulled that already had other duties, that were platoon commanders and other things. And so you didn't have special training, but to get in with an Iraqi unit and at the platoon and company level, by the time Travis was there, we had started to get this down to a science where you put 30 or 60 Americans with 30 or 60 Iraqis. And we didn't have all the specific language training or code, but we put them together in these battle positions. And it really started to work after a while, where you had the Iraqi Army, the Marines, and the Iraqi police. And the Iraqi Army would back up the police, and the Marines would back up the Iraqi Army. But it took some time. It took some gunfights in the street until things settled down. And eventually they really did. But do you have any more to comment on? A lot of people doubt the fact that we should even send advisors, or that we should have anything more to do in Iraq. Yet those of us who spent a lot of time there and saw some successes feel a little bit differently about it.
Well, I think it's just that. I mean, we had a ton of success there. And, you know, it couldn't be a more volatile place in the early 2007, late 2006. And it was all about that. It was all about us there as advisors and what we did to help them. And it's not like they didn't want to fight for freedom, but, you know, they didn't know how. And we had so much expertise. I mean, we got the finest military in the world. And we had, you know, great opportunity to work with them, and it worked. And that's why we've got 3,000 service members back there to help them and you know, bring in the air and help them with intelligence and help them with a lot of the more technical things that we're very, very capable of, and a little bit about what we do to be successful. We share with them, and you got to understand that they've never been there. They've never experienced that. And, you know, we did it back at that time, but, you know, it takes a while to really ingrain it and to live it and make it a part of who you are. It's great to have support system. And we had a lot of friends and family that were there for us, for sure. And that was very, very important. You know, personally, for me, you know, being a Marine, I was always into physical fitness, and I continue to do that. And it was a great outlet for me. You know, going on long runs had a great way of relieving the stress. And the other thing that we did as a family is really, you know, rather than to sit there and think about it, is to use Travis's sacrifice and try to turn it into something positive and try to make an impact for others. And that was what happened with the foundation. And you know, it was kind of a shame because my wife, you can imagine, as a mother, she had such a hard time, and just when she was really getting out of it is when she was diagnosed with cancer. You know, it was like the 5-year mark, and it was just got the rug pulled out from under her, because she really, now she knew she could really get going and do something positive, and the good Lord decided that he was going to take her. But I think, and that's what we do, by the way, with the families. Those expeditions, it's the same type of thing. You know, let's go out there and do something positive in your loved one's name. And it really does help. It's a big part of the healing process.